Hi, my name is Samantha Jackson. I decided to do my paper over the organized crime of sex trafficking. The title of my paper is Sex Trafficking and the Troubled Youth. Sex trafficking occurs when someone uses force, fraud, or coercion to cause a commercial sex act with an adult or causes a minor to commit a commercial sex act. A commercial sex act includes prostitution, pornography, and sexual performance done in exchange for any item of value, such as money, drugs, shelter, food, or clothes. Sex trafficking has been around for many, many years, and it's definitely not something that's new to the criminal justice game. However, the sad reality about the crime that a lot of people don't know is that the population that is most involved as victims is our youth, their children. The average victim is aged between 11 and 14. However, there is no set in stone standard characteristic profile of a child victim, so you cannot simply pick them out of a population. However, researchers have compiled many lists of different factors that can be taken into consideration when trying to decipher how susceptible a minor will be into falling prey to the sex trafficking business. My paper is basically a resource to shine light on the relationship and correlation between a youth's troubled upbringing, and their susceptibility to falling prey to the sex trafficking business, or even willingness to joining the sex trafficking business. Um, a little history about sex trafficking. It has been around for many, many years. It is a very old crime. It started as regular prostitution and over the years has evolved to whole sex trafficking rings and human trafficking, where people are actually sold and bought for the purposes of sex. A lot of political light was not shined on the actual crime until the early 1900s. In 1902, the International Agreement for the Suppression of the White Slave Traffic was drafted. Its purpose was to prevent the procreation of women and girls for immoral purposes abroad. After this, the crime continued to rise, and then in 1910, the Mann Act was passed, which basically forbid people from transporting other human beings across state or international lines for the means of prostitution. The crime then still continued to rise, and in 1949, the United Nations felt it necessary that they get involved, and they had the Convention for the Suppression of the Traffic in Persons and of the Exploitation of the Prostitution of Others, and this was ratified by 49 countries around the world. So it is a crime that is known. However, I feel like many would ask, what do I feel like our criminal justice system and our government should do in order to try to take hold of the crime? And in my eyes, I feel like they should just focus on implementing laws and policies in hotspot areas where the crime is very prominent. No, I do not think the crime will ever be fully eradicated. Much like the war on drugs, there will never be a true victor, because there will always be a demand for sex, and there will always be a demand for money, which means that there will always be some kind of sex trafficking going on. The most our criminal justice system can do, in my eyes, is take hold of the issue and crime in major areas to stop it from growing and to prevent it from spreading to other areas. A couple statistics. Many people think that sex trafficking only involves men and young girls. However, women and young girls. However, men and young boys are also affected. Out of all of the victims, 59% of them are women, 14% are men, 17% are girls, and 10% are boys. There are 1.5 million victims in the U.S. and 20.9 of them worldwide. Annually, 600,000 to 800,000 women, children, and men are bought and sold across international borders every year and exploited for forced labor or commercial sex. When internal trafficking percentages are added to that rate skyrockets to between 2 to 4 million. The saddest thing about all of these statistics is that at any given time, children will always comprise 50% of those victims. So that means that right now there is roughly 2 million children involved in the sex trafficking business. I also spoke a little bit about the role that technology has played in the success of the crime. We are a technology fueled society, and I feel like our technology innovations have made it much easier for sex trafficking to flourish. 76% of all sexual trafficking done with underage girls is done through the internet. There are now chat rooms and websites that are specified to sex trafficker predators and connecting them with vulnerable child victims. The Pew Research Center tells us that 95% of all youth and teens are now online, which means that even more youth is gaining access to the internet and to computers, which is even placing them in even more danger to fall prey to the crime. I then talk about what pushes our youth to the business. The National Center of Safe Supportive Learning Environments compiled a list of factors that they felt were top indicators of a child falling susceptible to the crime. And so what I did was compile those factors into a list of three larger categories, being environment, mental state, and sexuality and or early sexual experiences. As far as environment goes, it's basically saying that if a child is raised in a unstable household, it's likely that they will turn to the sex trafficking business for multiple reasons. There's often emotional distress in the home, which causes them to no longer want to be there, and they become runaways. Most of the children involved in the sex trafficking business are runaways and are homeless, living on the streets, which only does worse by exposing them to street crimes and causes them to turn to substance abuse as well as alcoholism. Also, if they are living in impoverished conditions, they will turn to other sources for money, and it makes it very easy for them to say yes to sex trafficking when predators are offering them more money than they ever seen simply for sex. So it also is bad for children to live in these unstable homes because it causes them to believe they can never really amount to anything, and they feel like turning to crime is okay because they have nothing else to offer the world. As far as mental state goes, adolescent ages, it's a very difficult time for many children. They don't know if they want to be independent and grown or dependent and still young. They're very confused and looking for love and acceptance. And a lot of times they look for that love and acceptance in pimps or even the men and women that are paying to sleep with them for just that night. Also, if a child is not mentally stable or logical enough to say no to predators that are offering to bring them into this business, then it's going to be very hard to expect them to say no, and it's going to be even harder to pull them out of the business. So that is also a major factor. As far as sexuality and early sexual experiences, members of the LGBTQIA community are more likely to fall susceptible to sex trafficking because they often feel feelings of isolation and alienation, especially at a young age. They have not fully become comfortable with who themselves. They do not fully understand why they are in a way different. So that causes them to not have any kind of social support system or really understand and love who they are. The Safe Supportive Learning Center tells us that although isolation and alienation are factors in turning to sex trafficking, the lack of social support is the highest indicator. As far as early sexual exposure, children that are exposed to sex early oftentimes get addicted to it, and they join the sex trafficking business because it fuels two fires. They are allowed to feed their negative addiction, which is sex, and then also get paid for it, so they feel like their pros at that time outweigh the cons. This is very common in bad neighborhoods and unstable households, and is oftentimes done by a family member or members of the community. This is where we come in. How do we combat the crime? We must first educate our community and our children on the seriousness of the issue. If our community knows what signs and factors to look for when trying to spot sexual trafficking, then they will be more apt to report it when they see it, especially people working at hotels, motels, old diners, and casinos, things like that. If we educate our children, then they'll know that they're targets, they'll know that they're victims, they'll know that they're being attacked right now, and they'll be more informed and educated when it comes to saying no. They'll understand what signs to look for, and they'll know who and what to stay away from. I also think that we should take away the glamour from the sex trafficking business. I feel like it's very glamorized in our media outlets like movies and TV shows. It's become kind of the norm, and I feel like when we choose to take that glamour away from that, we can raise awareness to how serious the issue truly is and cause people to shine light on the fact that our children are in fact in danger and they need our help.